In a recent video, I picked up a new steering wheel for my 1988 Saab 900 Turbo from the junkyard. A nice little 3-spoke upgrade over the wheel that is in there currently, and a couple problems with it, so we're going to be restoring it today. This is going to be quite the involved process, but I think the result at the end is going to be well worth all the time. So you can see here, the leather itself on the bottom half of the wheel is in pretty good shape. I mean, it's pretty stiff, but when you come up here, the top half is very cruddy and starting to sort of fall apart. So that's really the big area of concern here, is this top half of the wheel, but we're obviously going to be redoing the entire wheel. So there's going to be a few steps involved with this. The first one being just cleaning it with alcohol. So we're going to get a paper towel. We're going to wipe down the whole wheel pretty thoroughly, make sure we get all the dirt and grease from people's hands, things like that, off of the wheel. After that, we're actually going to use a blow dryer to get the steering wheel warm. We're not going to get it hot, but just warm to kind of open up the pores in the leather, so we can then use mink oil to sort of rub in there and start to sort of soften up that leather and kind of bring it back to life a little bit. After we do this for 3 days, we're going to move to some leather cleaner and conditioner. Followed by that, we're going to be doing some sanding and use of glue up here to kind of fill this in and smooth it out. And lastly, we'll be doing paint. So this process is definitely going to take a few days. Let's go ahead and get started with some isopropyl alcohol. I think this is going to take quite a few more paper towels. I'll catch up with you guys when I'm done with this. Way more than I thought I would need, but it's finally clean. Let's use the hairdryer now to warm this thing up. We can take our mink oil. It's kind of a very weird texture. We're going to get it on our fingertips. We're just going to massage it into the leather here. We're going to go around the whole steering wheel, all the leather with this. It's going to be a little bit tedious. But the leather right now, for reference, is very stiff and dry. It's especially dry because of the alcohol. It will soften up quite a bit after 3 days of this mink oil. So in short, what we're going to do is 1 day of the mink oil tonight. We're going to let it sit for about 24 hours. We're going to come back. We're going to apply more mink oil in the same fashion tomorrow night. Let it sit for another day, and then do it for a third time and let it cure for 1 more day before we move on to the next step in this process. You can see on the camera here a little bit that this oil is already sinking into all these cracks and pores in here, so that's great. I went around the whole wheel once, so I'm gonna go ahead and just put a little bit more oil on here, kind of massage it in some more, and be done for the night.
3 days later.
We've done 1 coat and sort of massaging of mink oil once per day for the last 3 days. Now we're ready to buff it off, and we can apply our leather conditioner here. And then after we use that, we're going to clean it with some alcohol again, and we can start sanding and gluing. And here's just for reference how much of that paste I ended up using. So a pretty good amount for such a small amount of surface area. There's so much oil on this thing that I can't get it 100% off, but the color on the wheel already looks a bit better. And these dry rotted cracks, I guess you could say, don't look as dry rotted anymore. This leather actually, you can see it has some give to it once again, which is awesome. So I almost feel like I could throw this back in the car right now and would be happy with the result. But we have lots more to do. So let's go ahead, start rubbing it down with some conditioner. Another thing I'm doing is, you might be able to see it on the bottom steering wheel or on the bottom horn button still. There's a little bit of white left on it. Unfortunately, they're all kind of faded and half coming off. I might see if I can find a like a really fine white paint marker to put that back on there, because I think it'll look better than just the black. But for now, I'm gonna get rid of the little bit of white paint that's on these. Just that way at least looks a little bit better than being faded. I put some conditioner and mink oil also very briefly on this part of the steering wheel, as well as the center cover for it, just to help restore that a little bit as well. This next step is definitely going to be the most tedious, and that is sanding and then using super glue on the wheels. So we're essentially going to be filling in all of these little cracks with super glue to smooth this all out. So ideally it kind of looks like it does right down here. So we're going to be switching between applying super glue, sanding. We're going to start with a 320 grit. Once we got it pretty smooth, the 320 grit, I'm going to move to a 600 grit. And lastly, I'm going to use 1,000 grit. 800 grit would also probably work as well. I went to a couple different stores and they didn't have 800, so I just grabbed 1,000. The more I look at this, the more like little imperfections I can find. So this, like I said, is going to be very, very, very tedious. I actually want to start by sanding to help make this a little bit smooth before we start applying the super glue. Destroyed this within about a minute of sanding, so I grab another sheet. Look at how good that looks already. That was literally 2 minutes of sanding, and for the most part I've completely smoothed this out. Wow, I'm genuinely impressed. You can see all the stuff that's come off it. Just gonna start hopefully filling in some of these deeper cracks with some super glue. It should dry to sand within about 30 seconds to a minute. I really hope that this works, because I absolutely doused this thing in super glue all around here. So let's go back to sanding. This half of the wheel feels pretty good right here. This middle section and over here still needs some more work though. It's been about 45 minutes. One piece of advice I can offer you guys is, if you're doing this, be very careful that the super glue does not run, because I have a bunch of spots all around the back where the super glue kind of ran down, and because of the grooves that are in here, the finger grips, getting this smooth is so painstaking. Getting this part pretty good probably only took me about 15 minutes. I still have to go over it 1 or 2 more times. This spot right here isn't too smooth yet. Regarding the whole bottom half of the wheel though, I just went over it 2 or 3 times quickly with some 320 grit, and honestly the whole thing feels super smooth. There was 1 or 2 very small imperfections before, and I think just sanding it a little bit smooth those out. So I'm not going to be doing any super glue on this bottom half. It's really just this whole mess I'm still trying to sort out. I'm pretty happy with where this is at. I closed my eyes just so my eyes wouldn't deceive me, and just carefully rubbed my fingers every which way around the whole thing. just to try and find some tall spots and things like that. And I think I've got it pretty good. There is one small area up here that concerns me a little bit where I might have sanded a little bit too much, but we're gonna move on to the 600 and see how it feels after that. Yeah, this one spot I was worried about a little bit already feels so much better. Done with the 600 grit. Honestly, that only took me about 15 minutes or so. Pretty happy with how it feels. So I think I'm going to go ahead and paint it now. Went ahead, took my gloves off, and I'm going to clean it with some alcohol, and then I want to feel over it one more time with my actual bare hands so I can get more of a sense of how it's all feeling. Holy shit, it feels so smooth. This is amazing. Went ahead, touched up a couple of spots, and now we're gonna mask it off. Definitely tedious and time consuming, so let's just skip all this. It's all taped up, ready to go. Let's do it. Went ahead and backed all the cars out of the garage. Figured this would be the best place to do it. The setup might not look the best. This is just an Amazon box I happen to have laying around, and I put about 15, 20 pounds of rocks in the bottom. I want to make sure it was nice and elevated so that way I could spray back behind here pretty easily. The color we're going to be using here is an SEM paint. This is the same brand paint I used on the 900 bumpers, and it was absolutely awesome. Super high quality paint. It's much more expensive than the standard Ace Hardware $6 can, but it works wonders. So this is the paint code right here. It's satin black. It's designed specifically for flexible coatings, so that way you can use it on surfaces like this. But we're gonna go ahead and get this shaken up and apply a few light coats. This says to wait about 10-15 minutes between each coat, or 5-10 minutes, excuse me, and see how it turns out. This is the, I guess you could say, semi-final product here. This is about 5 coats. I went in and had to get a couple of tough spots in here, like the underside, right under where that stitching is, all around is pretty tough to get while avoiding, you know, trying to cause a run spot. I'd say overall, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. You can see there's just a couple of very, very minor imperfections. The paint filled in a couple of the imperfections I was a little bit worried about. One problem that came from the sanding, I was trying to be very careful when sanding not to touch the stitching. You can see I've caused it to fray a little bit in some spots. So once everything's dry and I'm ready to reinstall it, I'll go ahead and get some tweezers and trim that all up. But I'd say overall, I'm pretty psyched with how this turned out. So now what we need to do is wait 30 minutes, and then we're going to apply probably 2 to 3 coats of the SEM clear. This is their low luster clear because we don't want it to be shiny. It's a steering wheel. So there's the paint code for that. There's 3 coats of clear, and honestly, it's not as black as I thought it would be. It almost seems like the clear coat made it just a little bit lighter. Could be because it's still drying a little bit, but I'd say overall, I'd give myself a 9.5 out of 10 on this job. looking up here, and again, I'm gonna fix up those frayed stitches there once it dries, but I'd say that's pretty good. Now we're gonna let it dry for 2 days and cure for 2 days.
Later.
It's been about 4 days since I painted it. It's been sitting out here drying, propped up, and I have to say I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I went ahead and used some of these super fine scissors to cut off a lot of the little excess stitches that kind of got frayed during my sanding because of my carelessness. But I think it's time. Let's pull off this masking tape here. One thing I'm going to be worrying about with this steering wheel is not really the texture. So the texture, it doesn't feel as soft and as supple as true leather. That's kind of one thing I noticed right away. I'm not sure if there's really much that can be done about that. My thought is maybe in a couple of months I can use more mink oil, although I don't know how that would react with the paint on here too well. I do, however, think that adding this clear coat, and I would say definitely err on the side of adding more clear coat than less, should help prevent paint and, you know, stuff from coming off onto my hands. Outside of that, I think it feels great. It's very smooth, but it still has sort of like a little bit of a rough finish, I guess you could say, like the leather would, to where you can still get grip on it. It's not too smooth, and I think that's a benefit of not going with too fine of a sandpaper grit to kind of retain that leather feel. I would like to hear what you guys think of how this turned out. I mean, just comparing it before versus after, I couldn't have made it any worse, and I think all in all, in the end, it definitely turned out way better, and I'm super happy with having the 3-spoke versus the old wheel that was in there. If you guys enjoyed this video though, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. Help me reach my goal of 100,000 subscribers. More content to come on the 900 soon, most likely. And I'll see you next time.